So it's like a subset that they need to like. What is the thing called?
Discord.
So they need to go on Discord and go to the Center for Career Services group and then fill out the form there.
Yeah. Which I don't think it'll be a form. I think they just need to put their name and
Net ID.
Yeah. Net ID if they go to UT.
Okay.
Or just name and
school email.
Yeah. You want to be the clicker person?
You can be the clicker person.
I don't know if it would mess it up. If you want to speak, let me.
I feel like because that one's only for the room, right?
Yeah.
I feel like we can project loud
Yeah, I
enough for
think
the
we'll
room.
be fine.
Okay.
So just
All right.
you just click this button.
Left and right. So other way.
You have it upside down.
Yeah. Sorry.
There you go.
Okay.
All right.
Oh wait, actually, let me practice first. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me get out of your way.
Okay.
Sorry.
You want to stand in front of this?
Yeah, I can stand in front of it. You ready? Hi, everybody. My name's Jessica. I'm here with Kyrah. We're from the Center for Career Development and Academic Engagement, and today we're going to be talking to you all a little bit about what our office does, resumes, interviews, and some career readiness things. If you could go into Discord, there's a little subgroup to where we would ask for you to please put your first and last name and your school email. So here's our agenda. We're going to be talking about who we are, where you can find us, what all we offer, resumes, which we're going to talk about steps of creating a resume, crafting resumes, and effective resumes. And then we're going to go through interviews. So we're going to do successful tips for interviewing and some things you can look for interviewing. So our mission at the Center for Career Development is to empower scholars to create and achieve career goals by providing comprehensive career education through collaboration and innovative practice. The center encourages scholars to engage in self-discovery, participate in experiential learning, build professional connections, and demonstrate career readiness. So we do all of this through providing students with services like our career coaches, resume practice, interview practice, and our ACE team. We are located in the first phase of the student union. I know that everyone in here has probably walked past the student union at least once. We are in the weird area above where the hands are. So the student union is next to the bottom of the hill. And we are on the second floor of phase 1. This is our academic and career exploration team. These lovely individuals will help you if maybe your GPA was a little low for your major and you got kicked out of your competitive major. You can make a meeting with one of them. They will be more than happy to help you find a new major. Or if you're in your major and you're like, I don't know if this is necessarily what I want to do anymore, I don't know if I'm interested in this, you can meet with them and they can help you find another major that may suit you better.
Okay, so some of the things that we offer in the office, specifically that team actually works on, are the academic and career exploration, like assessments and stuff. And you can find these all on our website, which is career.utk.edu. But some of those examples of things we do are the strong interest inventory. That's the one that we, I guess, are most popular for. That's especially good if, as Jessica said, if you are thinking maybe you don't want to do what you're doing anymore, or if you know that you like what you're majoring in, but you're not exactly sure how you want to apply it to your actual career. That's just a test where you basically rate a bunch of things that you're interested in, and then one of our coaches will sit down with you after that to go over your results and basically match up your interest with a career path. And then we also do Pathway U, type focus, values inventory worksheet. These are just all things you can find on our website that can help you decide what you want to do with your life, basically. And then some additional resources that we have are the What Can I Do With This Major, which is actually the pride and joy of our Career Center, because our center actually developed this software that basically just shows the majors that every university has, or every university who buys the software shows all the majors they have and what you can do with those majors, as the name implies. And so it's a really cool resource. And then we have the UTK major guides, which is once again just talking about different majors, and ONET, Occupational Outlook Handbook, and Candid Career. And all these things are more, if you know that you are doing what you want to do, but still want to look into other careers maybe. And these resources you can actually use even like after you are officially within your career, if maybe you want to branch out and do new things or something, these are just resources where you can explore other careers. Okay, so some of our career coaches, these are different from ACE coaches because ACE coaches work more with like exploratory students or transition advising, which is if you do decide to change your major. These coaches actually work specifically with different colleges and specifically with different majors. And so they're trained with those specific industries. So I know that a lot of people here are probably engineering or computer science and things like that. These would be the career coaches for architecture and design, communication, business, and then the liberal arts. These are career coaches also for business, and then STEM and engineering and agriculture. So our engineering coach actually did just change, unfortunately, yesterday. So if you want to meet with our engineering coach, you may need to wait for next semester to actually meet with someone who's specifically engineering. However, Kertisha down here in the corner, she works with STEM students and also does work with engineering some, so she can be handling those talks if you do want to meet with someone. But we did have to say goodbye to Katie, unfortunately. And then lastly, in the office, there's a peer career advisors, which you can see our faces up there without masks on. That's who we are. We work Mondays through Wednesdays, 1 to 4, and Thursdays from 10 to 4, doing drop-ins, which is where you come in with your resume, and we just look over your resume and critique that for you. And we also do cover letter critiques during that same time, as well as practice interviews, which for those you do have to make an appointment on, which is on Handshake. Hopefully everyone's at least somewhat familiar with Handshake. And we can also just do like general career advice. But a lot of times we would, if you aren't really sure if you want to meet with your actual career coach, you can come in and we meet with peer career advisors first. And sometimes we do advise you like, hey, you're asking great questions. Unfortunately, I'm not trained in engineering at all. So I might recommend that you go to this person, but I can help you more with general things. So yeah, I will let Jessica talk.
So now we're going to start talking about resumes a little bit. Your resume is your product sheet. So this is what shows everything that you can offer. Your resume needs to cover all of your experience and what you want to tell this employer or school or whatever it is that you're applying for that you can offer. So it's your sheet of saying, here's what I can do for you. So for the first step of preparing for a resume is reflection. So you need to sit down and think about all the things that you've done, college-wise, after college-wise, like what are you doing in college? What activities are you involved with? What classes have you taken that you think might be relevant to the job that you're applying for? If you're in student organizations, if you've studied abroad, if you're doing professional or business associations, if you've had an internship, some classes actually allow you to do what you want to do after you graduate. If you've been in one of those classes, please put that on your resume. The resume sections are heading. The objective one is optional. You don't necessarily have to have the objective statement. And then it goes education, experience, activities, and skills. You don't have to have all of those titles in your resume. If you want to not have activities because you haven't done that many activities, you can build out in a different section and really make your resume how you want to look at, how you want it to look. There is no one specific, like this is how a resume should look. There's no one perfect resume. So here's a example of a heading section. Your name needs to be the biggest thing. We suggest putting it in bold and centering it, and then putting your contact information underneath it. You don't necessarily have to have your full street address. You can just have what city you live in, what state you live in, and your zip code. Then you put your cell phone and we suggest your student email. And if you have a LinkedIn, put your LinkedIn on there as well. Then this is objective statement. So for the objective statement, you need to have the type of position that you're interested in. And if you have a specific geographic location, like you do not want to leave Knoxville, you put like, I'm not willing to move. If you're wanting to move to Colorado, say I'm looking for a position in Colorado. But basically the objective statement is like what you're looking for and what you have to offer. So like seeking a position as a secretary, I hope to utilize my time management organization skills. So it shows like what skills that person has and what position they're seeking.
Okay, so if you are currently a college student, this is typically the section that is recommended to go next. It doesn't have to be, but it just does show, like, if you don't have that much experience, this is showing this is what my experience is right now. So the education section, if you do go to University of Tennessee, I know that maybe not everyone in here is a UT student, but you would want it to start with the University of Tennessee and not just University of Tennessee, which is a small nitpicky thing, but it's because that is technically the school's correct title. And then you want to have what your degree is, which does need to be not just major chemical engineering or whatever. It needs to be the full title of that. So I actually am not positive what the engineering ones are, but mine would be Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and then major finance. So whatever your own thing would be. And you can put your concentration on there if you want to as well. Your GPA is recommended to be on there if it's above a 3.0. And you do want it to be out of the scale. So make sure to put out of 4.0 because some schools actually use a different scale. So a 3.0 out of a 5.0 scale is not as good. So yeah, and you can also put your major GPA on there as well as your overall GPA if you want to, especially if it is better than your overall GPA, maybe if gen ed's kind of destroyed you a little bit. And then you can also, this is optional, but you can have relevant coursework. This is especially recommended if you maybe don't have as much work or internship experience, but you did take a lot of classes. I know especially engineering students, you take a lot of very in-depth classes and stuff. So that could be a good idea for you. And also if your major is a different type of engineering than what you're applying for, but you have taken classes in that subject, that could also be a good idea for you. And you can also have things like your honors, licenses and certificates, and any study abroad experience you have in this section. And for the dates, don't do like August 2018 through when you're going to graduate. Just put your graduation date on there. That's because some people, don't graduate in 4 years, so just having the 4 years isn't really necessary. They just want to know when you're going to graduate because they want to know when can you start working for me. Okay, so this is arguably the most important part of the resume, so we may spend a little bit extra time on it. So the experience section, little disclaimer, this doesn't have to be work experience. It can be work experience obviously is important, also internship experience, but this could actually be things like class projects, which once again, I don't know much about engineering, but I have spoke with some engineering students and know that you do a lot of very big class projects and stuff. So that could be a great place to put those. So the experience section, you want to have the place where you worked, obviously, and what your title was, which if it wasn't a class, you could just say student. And then the location for where that was, as well as the dates. But the most important section of this is the bullet points, which is a description of what you did basically, but not just overall what you did. It's more so the skills you gained from that. And especially you want those to be transferable skills. So for example, if you were maybe a server at a restaurant, maybe you don't want to be a server for your whole life and you're not applying to a serving job, but that's one of the only experiences you have. So you obviously still want that to be on there, but you don't want to just be like, I served people food, because that's not really showing a skill that's relevant to what you're going to be doing. You more so want to emphasize things like teamwork and customer service and time management skills, because those are important in any job. So that's why this top one here, I thought this was a laser pointer for a second. Sorry. Oh, really? Oh my gosh, this is the best day of my life. Okay, so as you can see, this one here is that point of that bullet point is to show teamwork. So the collaborate is the strong action verb, because all your bullet points all the bullet points you want to start with a strong action verb, never an I statement. So you wouldn't want to say, I collaborated with, you want to just say collaborate. And the reason for that is actually, on average, employers spend about 15 seconds looking at every resume. So you want it to be very easy to scan. And that's why if you have these strong action verbs here, they're gonna see the word collaborate and be like, oh, collaborate, teamwork. And then maybe read the rest of that to see, don't just do the strong action verbs. You still wanna have an actual bullet point, so you can have more details in there, but that's the point of starting with the action verb. Yeah, and then you want to have quantifiers wherever necessary. So this is the example of that. I think that this slide should have more quantifiers on it. But the reason for that is because for that bullet point specifically, if you balance a cash register of $300, that's a lot different than $1,500. So it's kind of just more showing this, like, what scale you have worked on and different things. So also if you've maybe led a team of 15 people, is very different from leading a team of 2 people. Both of those are great skills, as both of them are showing leadership. It's just showing that on different scales, which kind of gauges what the employer's expectations of you will be. So yeah. Okay. So this is like a small little activity just to show I like the importance of these bullet points. So as you can see, both of these experiences are showing the same experience. This person was a waitress at Janet Steiner. However, you can see that there's a very notable difference between the way that these are written. And this is typically like a first draft resume. But does anyone want to say why? So I basically just told you the answer, but does anyone want to like say some specifics about why you would want to choose that second one? Yes, it totally is. Thank you. And some examples of that are it does have a quantifier, and also those action verbs are a lot stronger. Demonstrated is a fancier word than, just performed or something. So yeah, did I miss anything important there?
Also, another thing that I would note about between the first and the second one is formatting. So reading the first one is all kind of just like the information about where that person's working and when they work there and everything is all jammed together at the top. For the second one, they spread it out easier so your eyes can scan the information and they utilize the page more. So using more of the page helps like your resume, even if you don't have that much experience, look really big and full.
Yes. So you do want your resume to have as little white space as possible. So that's also the point of like filling it out. So this one has a bunch of white space right here, and the other one does not. So once again, this is kind of explaining more about the experience section. So this is showing how you can make 2 different jobs or like the same job applied to do 2 different resumes. Something that maybe a lot of people don't know is you should have at least a slightly different resume for most jobs you do apply for. Unless if you're applying to a bunch of engineering jobs, it's most likely you want to be showing the same things. But maybe some of those jobs do have slightly different responsibilities, so you would want to show at least slightly different things within your bullet points. So this is an example of, if you read these bullet points, they're actually explaining the exact same job that this person did. However, the person over here is applying to a business or sales job, and the other one's applying to a counseling job. So those require 2 very different skill sets. So the bullet points are worded differently to reflect that. So that's like, I think that one of the biggest examples is how this one says teach, which is a more personal word, and it sounds more, like working closely with those people and like more like mentoring. This one is train, which is very technical, like this is what you should do. So it's less, I guess, of a soft word. I won't read all of these because they are long, but you can kind of look at them and realize that the differences between them basically are, for the business and sales job, they're more technical sounding than the counseling job because it's a more like interpersonal job. I'll let you go now.
So the next section that we suggest is involvement or activities. This can be any activity that you've done after school, so clubs. If you're involved in a specific volunteer organization, you can put it on there. If you have space in your resume, we suggest putting bullet points with these as well, just like the bullet points for the previous section that we talked about. If you are in a leadership position in one of your activities or organizations afterwards, please highlight that. It shows that you have leadership skills to the thing that you're applying for. So if it's a job, they're going to be like, wow, this person's already taken initiative in this role to be a leader. So maybe they'll take initiative in our company to be a leader as well. So again, just the bullet points, and you can set it up like this. You can set it up like your work experience section. You can set it up however you feel necessary. For information, if you have a skills section, it's for hard skills, so computer languages. If you're certified in anything, if you have any specific skills, like you speak another language or something like that, that's where that goes. These are for hard skills. So you wouldn't put time management, you wouldn't put customer service or anything like that. This is just for like hard skills that you can actually show that you can do. For additional information, you include like really notable achievements. So if you finance 60% of your college through employment, like that's a really notable achievement. If you're able to travel extensively throughout the US and Europe, that shows that you have like global skills. So like you're able to work with people from different countries and stuff like that. Like you understand different cultures and the significance of those. Again, with skills, fluent in Spanish, and then they gave why they're fluent in Spanish to kind of show that they are actually fluent in Spanish.
Make sure for the skills to always put a proficiency level. Don't just list Microsoft Office and those other things. You have to put a proficiency level. So, like if you are fluent in Spanish and you're just now starting to learn French, you would want to specify fluent in Spanish, working knowledge of French.
So here are some different headings that you could have instead of the ones that we listed. We still suggest having your education as your first one, but maybe you want to put one of these in instead. You can put activities, student leadership, you could put relevant coursework, you could put volunteer experience, languages, honors and awards. These are just different headings that you could use in your resume instead of the ones that we suggested. So like if you have more volunteering experience, you can put that instead of working experience. If you have a lot of honors and awards that you want to talk about, you can put that instead of skills, or you can have both of them. It's just whichever works best for you. So again, we have our resume critiques. We do them Monday through Wednesday, 1 to 4, and then Thursday, 10 to 4.
And you can also do a resume critique with your specific career coach, because engineering, we don't know as much about engineering specifically, but if you wanted to meet with one of the career coaches, you can come to us also for a general format, and we can say things like, I think you should wear this differently to show, more of a skill set than what you currently are. But if you have a bunch of technical things on your resume, it may be better to, after you come to us, also go to Kertisha or whoever the new person will be. Okay, so now we're going to change from resumes to interviewing. By the way, I don't think we ever said it, but if anyone has a question at any time, you can stop us, but we can also do questions at the end, however you want. So successful interviewing. To start, like, once again, like as we talked about for resumes, the first step isn't really starting directly on the resume. It's first just making a list of things that you want to include on it. Similarly, the first step to having a successful interview is to start with a personal reflection as well as company research. So if you've applied for a bunch of jobs using that awesome resume you just completed, then you're going to, once you have that interview scheduled, you don't just want to go into that blindly. You want to prepare ahead of time. I always recommend actually just making a list of things like your strengths, different experiences that you may want to showcase that show those strengths you've already talked about. And then you want to do company research because you want to go in knowing quite a bit about the company. Because if you just go in and like they ask you a specific question about their company and you can't answer that, that's going to look pretty bad on you because it'll show that you're actually not that interested in them. Because if you're interested in a certain company, you would have researched it. So obviously you want to know things about what the company does, what their purpose is, maybe the kind of people that they serve, the kind of products that you would be making or working on. Obviously, that would be pretty bad if you couldn't answer those questions. But then also you want to know things like their mission statement, which you don't have to be able to write it perfectly, but at least know what those companies' values are, which is also important because if you get an interview and then you do that research and you find that the company has very different values than you do, you may not want to work there after all. And so it would be good to know that ahead of time before you actually are committed to a company and you're like, wow, this place is horrific. But you want to find things about that company and you want to connect your skills to it. So maybe if a company really values or they spend a lot of time doing community service together and it's a company that values serving that community, and you also enjoy doing that, that could be something that you make a note of because it could be a good thing to talk about in the interview. And then you want to think about possible interview questions that they're going to ask based both on what their company stands for and the research that you've done, but also just in general, what do people ask in an interview, which we do have. Already talked about setting up a practice interview with us, but when you go to a practice interview, you schedule that on Handshake and you can make the note, this is what I'm applying for. And we actually have like files upon files of practice interview questions for specific industries as well as just basic things. So we actually have like engineering questions, and those would be the questions that we would ask you from because we want it to seem as similar to the real interview as it would be. So obviously we're not going to ask you questions, that are super basic because I know that engineering is more of a technical job, so it is more likely that you would be asked some more technical things. But yeah, so you can also, I don't know if you all know, if you are a UT student, I'm sure that other universities also do this, but you do have a subscription to Glassdoor through UT, which you can access through the career website. And the reason I say that is because Glassdoor is my favorite place to prepare for interviews, especially if it's a pretty well-known company or like a well-respected company, because you can look them up on Glassdoor and actually find people who have interviewed there, and they will tell you what their experience is like. It's kind of like they're rating what their interview experience was so that you can prepare yourself. So maybe they'll be like, they asked me this really hard technical question and it kind of threw me off. Here was the question. Or they asked me a whole bunch of behavioral questions, and that can just give you guidance on how exactly to prepare. So yeah. Okay, so making the most of the introduction. This is when you first get to the interview. So this is before the interview really starts, but you're probably already really nervous. Things to remember are to arrive early, 10 to 15 minutes early. Don't like show up like a whole hour early or something. It's just, it looks a little goofy and it won't necessarily look good for you. And you're also just gonna be sitting there really bored for a long time. But do show up early. And then have a firm handshake. Some companies are kind of not doing this right now because of COVID. So maybe wait for them to go for the handshake first, just in case, you also don't know who you're trying to shake, like the person whose hand you're trying to shake, they may be super immunocompromised and they're like, please don't touch me. So yeah, wait, let them make the first move and have a confident voice. You want to smile and look enthusiastic. If you had to roll out of bed at 6 a.m. and it's a super early interview and you don't want to be there, don't let them know that. Pretend that you're super happy to be there because you should be, because you could potentially get a really great job. And then you also want to carry on informal conversation, which this can mean both like whenever you're walking back to the interview, like whenever, like you just want to kind of build that, I guess, view of yourself that you are a friendly person who can connect to people. Like some personal experience I have with this was I showed up about 15 minutes early to an interview and then it started 30 minutes late. So I was in the waiting room for a very long time. I became best friends with the receptionist and I think it went really well for me because I did end up getting a second interview. I didn't end up taking the job, but I think that me and that receptionist becoming great pals helped me out because that is a valuable member of the company and she was able to give in a good word for me. So yeah. Would you like to go? Or I don't know how many slides that was. Okay.
So while you're talking in your interview, be mindful of how you look and how you're speaking. So be sure to have good posture. I fidget when I do interviews. I fidget in general. I'm not a person who can sit still very well. Something that I do, I wear rings all the time. I'll take my hands and tuck them underneath the table. I can play with my rings there. You have a pressure point on the palm of your hand. You can massage that underneath the table. It's a way that you can fidget without them seeing you fidget, so they don't think that you're nervous for the interview. Be sure to watch out for filler words, and stuff like that. Just make sure to keep a conscientious thought process going. Am I saying a lot of filler words? One way to eliminate using filler words is to prepare for the interview. And while you're in the interview, if you need a second to think about the question, ask them to repeat the question or take a pause. It's okay to take a pause unless you're taking a 5-minute pause, and then that's a little awkward, but you can take a beat after they ask you a question. Think about the question and then give them an answer. Interviewers are not going to count off for that. They're going to be like, wow, this person's really thinking of thoughtful answers. This is a good interview. Your nonverbal cues are just as important as your verbal cues. So slouching, poor eye contact, lack of expression, and talking with your hands. I talk with my hands quite a bit as well. That's why I like to keep them clasped underneath the table unless I'm giving a specific example. So be sure to be mindful of moving your hands around, fidgeting, and your posture. So we have different types of interview questions. There's traditional, behavioral, technical, case study, brain teaser, and other. So the brain teaser actually applies to engineering students. So they'll ask you a question that may be related to your engineering field and ask you how you would solve that question. For traditional questions, it's just tell me about yourself, and questions that are more specific to the position. There's behavioral ones that are tell me about a time when. There's technical ones, which again are pretty closely related to engineering students because they'll ask you specific technical questions for the position that you're applying for. So these are a list of typical traditional questions. So there's open-ended, tell me about yourself. There's career, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? There's personal characteristics, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? I will say the question for what is your weakness, they're not necessarily concerned with what your weakness is. They're concerned with how you're fixing it. So you could say, my weakness is this, and I'm managing it by doing this. Their company knowledge, what's your interest in our company? So I just recently interviewed with a company, and they flat out asked me, why are you wanting to work with this company? Why us? So be mindful of in your research, know what the company does and know why you want to work with that company. And for experience, be ready to talk about your different experiences that you've had. For behavioral questions, it's tell me about a time, give me an example, describe a situation. We suggest for these questions using the STAR method, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but basically a brief overview of that is situation, task, action, and result. So when they ask you one of these questions, it's a formula for you to give them a specific answer that is concise and clear, and it covers the question fully. I am a person who tends to ramble a little bit in interviews because I'm super excited to talk about myself, but I'm also super nervous, and I don't know if I've answered their question right. So the STAR method really helps me answer these questions. So these are typical behavioral questions broken up in categories. So there's leadership, teamwork, work ethic, critical thinking, and adaptability. So these questions are specific examples of something that they will ask you for one of these categories. For leadership, it's initiative. For teamwork, it's had to work with someone. Work ethic, time you went above and beyond. Critical thinking, judgment and logic. Adaptability, face some. So listen for these key words when they're asking you these questions. It helps you decide what they're actually asking you, because sometimes employers can ask you really tricky questions, and knowing the key words of the question can help you answer the question in an efficient manner to be sure that you cover the answer that they want to hear from you.
Okay, so Jessica already introduced this, but this is the formula to answer behavioral questions. This especially helps me because I'm someone who tends to be a nervous rambler and I talk way longer than necessary. And behavioral questions can sometimes trip someone up, especially if you didn't do that personal reflection before an interview and think about a bunch of experiences you could potentially talk about. So this will just help you to do that. Which I've actually, after I first learned this method, the first interview I had afterwards, it didn't go well. But during it, I was actually like, okay, situation was this. This is a task I had to do, which wasn't, don't do it like that. Learn from me. It didn't go well, but if I just took out those parts, it probably would have gone decently. But I'll try to think of an example that has something to do with engineering without being way too specific. But like maybe if the question is, tell me about a time when you had to work on a team. So you could say, in my chemical engineering class, I don't know, in this one engineering class, I had a group project where we had to create a windmill. Is that something you would potentially do? Maybe. Okay, sweet. Okay, you had to create a windmill, and you were on a team of however many people. So to complete that task, you broke up the specific parts, and maybe you had one person who was very good at blueprints. I don't know. I'm making something up. I'm not good at engineering. Someone was good at this. Someone else was good at this. Someone was good at this. So you had to divide up those tasks based on each individual person's strengths, and maybe one person felt like not super confident with a certain part of the project. So like that was someone who wasn't given that task. And then, so the action, that would be the action is where you divide up the tasks and you tackle it together. And then the result is, this is the most important part of the STAR method. It's not just showing like what actually came out of it. Like you could say on that project, we got an 87. Like that's technically the result of that experience, but the result that they care about is the skills that you gained from that. So especially if it's a question that's something like, tell me about a mistake that you've made, or tell me about a time you failed. So go back to that example. You all could not get along and the project did not go well. You ended up getting a 40 on it. It just all fell apart, did not turn like a windmill is supposed to, did nothing. So the result is, from that experience, we failed, but that's not the result they want to hear. It's actually really bad to say that that is your only result, because it, for one, sounds really negative, but also is like, okay, what I just learned about this person is they are a failure. That's obviously not what you want an interviewer to think about you as. So the result that you want to say is, what I learned is it's really important to be able to, set your differences aside. What we should have done is communicate more. That was our biggest mistake. We didn't tell each other when we were struggling with something and we needed help. I learned that you should check in on your teammates, find out what they need help with, work together more, communicate more often, and don't think about the fact that they have, different beliefs than I do, and we really hate each other. They stole my boyfriend. I don't think about those things. And so that's the important result that you can learn. So yeah, does anyone have any questions about that? Because the STAR method can be a little difficult for some people. Yes.
Some people actually use STAR method in their resume. Do you recommend that or not? Or that just doing it?
Like use it within the resume? I guess to a certain degree you kind of use it, but it's more just like the results portion. You don't want to say like within a resume, be like within the bullet points, I'm guessing is where you're talking about doing that. I guess you could say like, it's more the results portion because you want to show the skills that you gained from something, but you don't want to do the whole STAR method within a resume, mostly because that is difficult to scan. And it's something more, if you put the results portion or like be like, completed a group project with 5 people and built a windmill, I guess that's actually not even a good bullet point because you're not showing the skill you gained. So you can say like worked with group of 5 to create successful windmill. Is kind of a bullet point, but you wouldn't want to say like the whole action task, like we had a project to do this, we did this, divided it up, because that's just going to be difficult to skim. And then if that is one of your bullet points, then that could be something you talk about in the interview. So I would definitely say overall reserve it for interviews and not on a resume, but it is more for conciseness. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
How long your answer should be? I heard someone said that you should answer a behavioral question within like you should think that you don't lose it.
I don't know about specific. What's the ratio again for them talking to you talking?
I think it depends really. I've been to a lot of interviews recently where the company tells me a lot about themselves and then I get to talk about me. So I don't think there's a specific time limit. Like I think that 30 seconds may be a little bit too short to answer a behavioral question. So I would probably like just go through the STAR method, and once you're done with the STAR method, stop speaking. You don't, there's not, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a time limit of like, this is when you have to stop speaking, you need to get through the interview like this. Just be mindful of your answers and be concise with your answers.
One like way to think about it could be like for situation and task to me are kind of the same thing because here was a situation, here's what I had to do. So whenever I think about it, I try to do one sentence for situation and task together. And then for the actions, like 2 to 3 sentences, depending on how extensive it was. And the results portion, typically 2 sentences, both what the overall result was, but more importantly, what I learned from it. So for that instance, it could potentially be like 30 seconds. But I feel like typically in interviews, you can sort of gauge it. And also, a lot of times they tend to ask follow-up questions. That's happened to me a lot whenever I gave my answer. And then they ask like, oh, okay, can you explain more about this? So then I end up having to talk a lot more about the same topic. But does that help thinking about it like in number of sentences? Okay, awesome. Did anyone else have any questions? Or okay. I think that the ratio I was taught was it should be like 30-70 or like 40-60. And that's just a way to, if you're having a bunch of really long answers, try to remember that like, it feels like I've been talking 80% of this interview and they've been talking 20%. I should try making my answers a little shorter so they talk more. It's something like that. But once again, as Jessica said, it kind of depends on the interview. Okay, no. Okay, so some other types of questions besides the traditional and behavioral are technical, which is something that you all probably have heard a lot or will hear. This is just a very, well, I was about to say it's a very basic one, but I don't know the answer, so maybe I shouldn't say that. But it'll be something like, what is this within your industry, or what's the difference between this? Case study is kind of the same as a situational, except it's not, or not situational, the same as a behavioral, except it's more of a what if behavioral. So it's, you know, laying out something for you and asking how you would handle that situation. But you would want to approach it the same way. So be like, so if I were in this situation and I had to do this, here's the actions that I would take and here's the result I would hope for. And then brain teaser is something that I definitely know that I've seen within our practice questions for engineering students. There's like a couple brain teaser questions. Like an example was, why are manhole covers circular? And then the one about the lights, like making like how to know which light switch works if you can only go in the room a certain number of times, those types of questions. This one is more like a business question, but it's potentially could be asked it too. But basically it's just the skill that they're trying to show from that is like analysis. And then some other questions are things like a big one that I've seen is what hobbies do you do? And those questions you really do want to answer honestly. Like for this one, you don't just want to say like, oh, I read my chemistry textbook, like sound boring. Like you want to be like, you know, I read the new Stephen King book and I loved it because it's like because those questions are actually asked to get a little sense of your personality because these people are going to have to work with you. They want to know if you're insufferable or not because that does matter. Personality matters. Okay, so after you are asked questions, then you are going to have to ask questions. When you're asked in an interview, do you have any questions for me? Never, ever, ever say no because it's going to make you look either unprepared or more importantly, it's going to make you look uninterested. You want to show enthusiasm. So you always want to have questions prepared to demonstrate your interest in the company as well as your knowledge of the company. And also you can actually use these for like, if you really are trying to decide, do I even want to work here? This is a good place to ask questions where you can determine that. And it can also help you figure out exactly what the employer is looking for. So for instance, you can say like, what are skills that someone in this job would need to be successful? And if they say things that you have not at all talked about, you could be like, oh, great, well, I have that skill because this or whatever. So it could give you more time to maybe win them over to your side. So you always want to have at least 2 to 4 prepared, but you can have more prepared just in case, because sometimes if you're going to ask something like, what would the day-to-day be like, they may actually say in the interview, like, by the way, your job like this day-to-day would be like this. So always have more just in case, that kind of thing. And you do want to have those written down with you because you can forget them. And you want them to be more like specific to the company. So you don't just want to ask, like, obviously don't be like, what'd you think about that game last night or whatever. You want to say things more like, what are your favorite things about working for this company? That's always my favorite thing to ask because it is where I learn the most about the company culture. So if they answer something like, oh, I really love all the people who work here. They're really fun. We like to do things together after work a lot, and I enjoy that. We really feel like a family. Those are things that I care about a lot. Not everyone does. Some people just want to be like, work, home, very separate, never interconnect. But I want to enjoy going to work. So if they just answer something like, I love the pay, then I probably wouldn't want to work there. Well, maybe. It depends how good the pay is. Okay, so I feel like that pretty much covered all of that. So yeah, I'll turn it to you. I don't know why I gave you
It's okay. So after an interview, it's really good to do a follow-up to talk to the employer and be like, hey, listen, I really enjoyed that interview. Mention something specific. So if you do a follow-up, be like, I really enjoyed talking to you about this one part of this position, or I really enjoyed learning about this position or this thing that we talked about during the interview. Being specific about it really shows that you paid attention and that you were interested in the position. One thing that I would suggest is making it professional. I suggest doing one after every interview if you have the time, or if you feel like the interview went really well. If you're really motivated about that position, do a follow-up. Send them a quick email. We used to suggest sending them a letter, but that's kind of phased out a little bit now, especially with COVID. So I'd suggest sending an email. Do you all have any questions for us?
Speakers. Sure, you guys go onto the Discord, the text chat for this, and enter in your first and last name, as well as your email and university, so they can get your information and everyone that attended.
They do. That's how our company gets their funding.
I have one question.
Yes.
Earlier when you said like you have resources for different types of interviews, do you have any resources for case interviews for consulting?
For what was that?
Consulting.
For consulting?
Yeah.
Like a consulting position?
Yeah, I think we do.
I think so. I would need to look really quick in our Google Drive, just because there's so many like industry specific ones. But I'm pretty sure we do. And if we don't, if you say like in the practice interview, like what job you were applying for or whatever like that, our job is to prepare before an interview, which means if we don't have questions that are specific for that position, we're going to do the research to be like, okay, what kinds of questions? So if we see that consulting jobs do have a lot of technical questions, we would find questions that you're likely to be asked. So if we do not, we can make it, basically. And that goes for all positions, but we probably have something that's at least similar.
Yeah.
Then you can access to someone to that.
I can, if we have them, I can. Do you go to UT?
No, I'm from Swan.
Okay. Then I can come get your email and then I can send you some.
I want to put my email in
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Sweet. Yeah.
Share, if you feel like share the link, you can put it in the Discord chat.
Okay.
I have no idea. No, it's still in the English in the South. It's like,
Thanks, sorry to like hand off my stuff, a little weird,
That's
but
okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming, people. I think there's another TikTok. Immediately, I'm gonna stop the recording. Click.
Well.
Is that here?
It's at